So as we discussed the other day, it looks like Joe Manchin is seriously considering running for president. That is hilarious, and that is also very sad and terrifying. And he takes himself very, very seriously. He's doing all these events and stuff, which, by the way, is a hint that he really might actually run. He's in New Hampshire doing these events and, talking about how I'm moderate, I'm above the fray, I'm wonderful. So they had one of these events over the weekend where they all, did a little sucky-fucky with each other, jerked each other off. Aren't you so moderate and brilliant and wonderful? Yes, I'm moderate and brilliant and wonderful. Aren't you moderate? Oh, yes, I'm moderate, yes. This is what they do with these stupid events. And then we got this gem. Shout out to The Intercept for this. No Labels, that's the, centrist third-party group. No Labels board member said, if MLK were alive today, he'd be aligned with Joe Manchin and No Labels. How do you even respond to things like this? Why is the world so messed up, man? Manchin and a group of failed moderate politicians assembled in New Hampshire on Monday to tout No Label's 73-page centrist manifesto. By the way, we went over that the other day. Check out that video. At the No Labels luncheon at the Puritan Backroom in Manchester, New Hampshire on Monday, the punchline was hard to miss. A who's who of failed moderate politicians and politicos, including former Senator Joe Lieberman, one of the most disliked politicians in the country, by the way, former governors Pat McCrory and John Huntsman Jr. and former representatives Fred Upton and Joe Cunningham gathered alongside U.S. Senator Joe Manchin. They were assembled to tout their political program in the form of a 73-page centrist manifesto outlining the path forward for a moderate American presidency. Hey, by the way, guys, I found a moderate American presidency you might want to look into. It's called the Biden administration, and it's currently ongoing right now. There's your moderate presidency. Oh, they mean more moderate than that. Okay, so let me get this straight. You want to split the difference between the Republicans and the moderate Democrats, which means on one end you have crazy people, on the other end you have half crazy people. You want to be like 75% crazy. That's your goal. That's the sweet spot. Give me some 75% crazy is where the country wants us to go. Neither press nor clergy were seen entering the private event where in a literal back room, hilarious, the fading stars of a puritanical third way met to further a plan that they have all but described as political blackmail. Huntsman, a former governor of Utah and presidential candidate who would later share the stage with Manchin during a town hall, shot me $1 billion grin before saying that No Labels was assembling to inject moderate politics into the bloodstream. Later, Manchin would double down on the idea of forced injection, claiming only credible threats can bring both parties to their knees. Outside in the parking lot, local police told me to leave. Across the street at the Puritan ice cream shop, I was handed a spoonful of chocolate as I waited for owner Arthur Pappas to emerge from the back of the store. Pappas also owns the conference hall across the street. His son, Chris Pappas, serves as a Democratic representative for New Hampshire. No Label cites polling data showing an increasing number of political independents, and thus concludes that those disaffected voters are there for the taking. So let me pause here to just reflect on this notion. The idea that, hey man, polls show that, more and more people are identifying as independent. Okay, that's true, but the specifics matter. So if you go talk to those independent voters, what you're going to find is a significant number of them are, for example, to the left of the Democratic Party, and they don't think the Democratic Party is left enough. Or they're libertarian, and they don't fully agree with the Republican Party because of big spending or whatever. So you have people to the right of the Republicans, to the left of the Democrats, people who are kind of apolitical are in the mix there. People who have policy ideas that are all over the map might be in there too. There might be somebody who personally, I'm very pro-life. I'm anti-abortion. But also, I think we should raise taxes a lot on the wealthy. And so they don't fall into the typical label of a quote-unquote moderate in the way that Joe Manchin is thinking of them. Despite being registered as an independent, the proprietor was weary about No Label's presence in New Hampshire that evening, which he saw as threatening to derail the 2024 presidential election with a third-party candidate who would almost certainly benefit the election odds of Donald Trump. I'm not entirely sure what their whole plan is, Pappas said, nervously eyeing the boat shoe and Brooks Brothers-clad attendees. I love how they act like they're the everyman, and meanwhile they're all really snobby, stuck-up, wealthy pricks, drifting into the hall. Look at what that guy unleashed, Pappas said in reference to the former president. Their whole plan ahead of the 2024 election is to raise $70 million to back a potential third-party run for president should Democrats and Republicans fail to coalesce around No Label's hyper-centrist political vision. Manchin has emerged as the most likely candidate for the job, flirting publicly with No Labels while dodging questions from the media about his plans. Manchin's appearance at the No Labels town hall in the critical swing state of New Hampshire on Monday evening was another step in that direction. Emblazoned everywhere on the walls, hats and t-shirts at St. Anselm College was the low-effort slogan, "Common sense." Oh my God. I'm guilty of this too, like anybody else, but it is the laziest and sloppiest thing in the world to be like, this is common sense. Because everybody thinks they have common sense. From fascists to communists to everything in between. People think, I have the common sense ideas, and if you disagree with me, then you are anti-common sense. No, everybody thinks they have common sense. The crowd gathered to ring in the No Labels manifesto, which was released over the weekend and lays out a political philosophy that it claims has been erased by the radicalization of both the left and the right. Highlights include, public safety is the highest priority. We need to fix the criminal justice system so career criminals can't keep committing crimes. Oh, that is brilliant. That nobody thought of that before. It's not like everybody already agrees with that. A world led by America is safer than a world led by Russia and China would be. America must strike a balance between protecting women's rights to control their own reproductive health and our society's responsibility to protect human life. Okay, I got news for you. Again, you have the standard Democratic position. That is what Roe v. Wade is. Roe v. Wade was a moderate decision. In the first trimester, abortion is a right. In the second trimester, you can have some health regulations. In the third trimester, if states so choose, they can ban late-term abortion. That's the moderate approach. That's the Democratic position. So this triangulating garbage is so tedious. God damn it. For an hour and a half, Huntsman and Manchin played their hits, bringing down the deficit, marginally increasing background checks for gun purchases, and means testing social safety net programs. Guys, this is literally just status quo. This is literally just, it's like that famous tweet from Internet Hippo of like, just got back from the Centrist rally. We held hands and chanted, nothing better is possible. It's like, that's what this is. This is just status quo humping. This is not about me or anybody else, Manchin told the crowd. It's about two parties that have gone to their respective side, the extreme right and the extreme left. The middle has been left behind. There's no voice for the middle. Look, I consider myself a centrist, in the sense that my political takes are generally, on most issues, right smack dab in the center of mainstream public opinion. The majority of Americans want universal health care. So do I. The majority of Americans want to raise taxes on the rich. So do I. The majority of Americans want paid family leave. So do I. We can go down the list here, but on most things, I have very moderate centrist-y sensibilities. That's not what they mean when they say centrist, because they're not in favor of the things that I'm in favor of and that many of you are in favor of. Theirs is like pro-corporate. That's their whole thing, is they're funded by millions and millions of dollars in corporate money, and they want to cut out the middleman and just go full corporate rule. That's the idea. Ironically, Democratic operatives and never-Trump Republicans have framed the third-party threat from No Labels as the same, a sinister plot between the far right of the GOP and the far right of the Democratic Party. In large part, that's thanks to the group's track record raising funds from conservative mega-donors like Harlan Crow. But given the composition of the No Labels board and political supporters, the idea that all of its members are aligned with a pro-Trump plot seems unlikely. The former politicians in attendance saw their centrist political clout erased after the rise of Trump. Manchin, meanwhile, emerged from the Trump years with stronger influence over the Democratic Party. Yet his determination to maintain a corporate centrist line in West Virginia has led to plummeting polls in recent years and an all but certain defeat next November to a Republican Governor Jim Justice should he run for Senate. Now, let me pause on this for a second because it's important to flesh this out. Manchin's polls in West Virginia are abysmal, and that's the place where he would be the most popular. Why are his polls in West Virginia abysmal? Well, the answer is very simple. Look, in West Virginia, a lot of the voters are going to be socially conservative there. That's true. And Manchin is, moderately socially conservative. Okay, fine. But West Virginia voters are also populist. They don't want Medicaid cut. They don't want Medicare cut. They don't want Social Security cut. They're not clamoring for more tax cuts for the rich or deregulation of Wall Street. And that's what Joe Manchin does all day. That's what he does. So he's socially conservative, right? And economically corporatist, corrupt. They don't like that. As heads adorned with common sense baseball caps bobbed in the evening light, colored blood red from Canadian wildfire smoke, I caught no labels board member Benjamin Chavis heading out the door. A former assistant to Martin Luther King Jr., I pressed Chavis on how the legacy of King, which includes broadening social spending, taxing the wealthy, and opposing endless war in Vietnam, could possibly track with the platform presented by the event's speakers, two millennial moderates. Quote, Dr. King was a centrist, Chavis told me. If he were alive today, he would be a member of the No Labels Party. I moved to remind Chavis of King's words in his letter from a Birmingham jail, in which he decried the white moderate as one of the main roadblocks to justice. Quote, I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice. But before I could get an answer, Chavis whisked away. This is too great. Like this group of so-called centrists, massive corporatists, they sit around all day, suck each other off about how intellectual they are. It's like the layman's idea of an intellectual when it comes to politics, right? Well, you know, the right says a lot of crazy things, and the left says a lot of crazy things. I've risen above the fray. I'm post-partisan, and me, bro, I like split the difference. There's some good ideas over here. Some good ideas over here. There's some bad ideas over here. There's some bad ideas over here. It's like your uncle who's never read a news article or taken a real policy stance in his life and his like layman's take on politics at Thanksgiving. It's like, you think you sound brilliant, but really it's just like a lazy commentary. It's just like a lazy default assumption. If we split the difference, maybe that's a good idea. Is it? Is it always a good idea to do that? It's like, when we used to have the debate of like evolution versus creationism. Is it the right thing to do to like split the difference on those two things? Or climate change versus it's not happening. What do you split the difference and say it's happening, but just like a little bit or something? Sometimes the answer is not down the middle. Sometimes the answer is just like clear cut. But look, on the Martin Luther King point, it doesn't get any more pathetic than this. There's a great article from years ago, 2017, in The Intercept. They talk about what's called the Santa Clausification of Martin Luther King Jr. and how they basically cleaned up his image to make him seem like safe for the modern era. But the fact of the matter is, out of his own mouth, he considered himself a democratic socialist. That's what he considered himself. He was deeply, deeply anti-war against the war in Vietnam, and he gave speeches on that front. By the way, that position at the time was not popular. He had like a 9% approval rating or something at the time. Why? Because he was actually bucking power centers. He said injustice in the form of healthcare is like the worst kind of injustice. He was protesting with unions, and I believe he was even doing that when he got killed. So this is a guy who cared about unions, he cared about wages, he cared about healthcare. He wanted a grand alliance between working people who are black and white. Anti-war, deeply, deeply anti-war. The list goes on. And in this article, they sort of lay out a lot of these things that are kind of hidden about MLK. So when you can't say he would have been a moderate or a centrist unless you mean centrist in the way I consider myself a centrist, which this guy doesn't mean it like that. Back then, that actually didn't even make sense because today, all these ideas are actually very popular. Back then, they weren't. They just weren't. When he was out there railing against the Vietnam War, that wasn't a popular position. So he was a radical of the time. Now, you could say there were some people who were more radical than him, right? Because some people wanted outright violence to achieve their political ends, and he was committed to nonviolence. If you want to say on that specific issue, he was a moderate or a centrist because he wanted to make change, but he wanted to do it in a morally principled way and a commitment to nonviolence, that's fair, but that's like the only issue. All the other issues, he was committed to a democratic socialist ideal. And they just tarnish his legacy by comparing to Joe Manchin. Really, Joe Manchin? Joe Manchin is one of the reasons why we don't have lower prescription drug prices across the board. Did you know that? It was him and Kyrsten Sinema that forced Biden to only do it for like 5 drugs or 10 drugs and only do it for seniors. If it wasn't for him, we'd be in a much better situation. It's because of him that, we didn't lower the age of Medicare to like 55 or 60. So it's because of him we didn't extend the child tax credit, which reduced child poverty by like 50%. Joe Manchin was like, let's increase it 50%. Let's get rid of it and let's not have a discussion about bringing it back. He's a corporatist, and this is a corporatist endeavor. And by the way, the media is going to take it a hell of a lot more seriously than they take Cornel West running with the Green Party. Even though there's an argument based on the policy positions, Cornel West is more centrist because he's right smack dab in the middle of mainstream public opinion when he talks about wages, when he talks about healthcare, when he talks about taxes, etc. So anyway, there's a long segment here, but you guys get the gist of it. These people are absolutely insufferable. They think they're coming to save the country, when in reality, they are nothing but deep representatives of corporations and the status quo. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.